Hey guys, I finally got around to editing down this video on how to make a Frit spoon. I think the main benefit here is just showing you guys how I make an inside Frit hollow section. From there you can use it to make a number of things. I'm using Triple Passion from Glass Alchemy. The grade I'm using is 70 grade. It's not too big, which I found larger Frits harder to melt in, and it's not too small, so that way I can still see the grains. I like seeing those because I think it gives it a cool effect, especially when it's magnified by the clear. Now right now I'm just cleaning up the end of a 19mm blank section. The way that I put the Frit inside of the tube is probably a little unique. What I'm doing is I like to keep a large opening and then close up the other side. You can see here I'm just blowing a nice little round bottom. I'm going to attach that to a 7mm solid punty rod. What that's going to do is it's going to give me a really big opening to put my Frit inside of. And then also, I had issues before when I tried pouring Frit down my blow tubes where the Frit would get stuck inside the tube. Once that happens, I mean, you can still use the tube, but it's really limiting your usages for it because you're always running the risk that some of that Frit might blow down into the hollow section that you're working. So I really have come to like this method for making my hollow Frit sections. Here you can see how important that roller is. It's really important that I get this centered so that way once I get the Frit in there, I'm going to go back to close it up and attach a hollow blow tube. Well, if I'm not center, it's going to be very tough to get a good weld on that blow tube to the end of the blank. Just using a little plastic scoop. You can see it's got some melted spots where I hit the glass too hot. Just pouring it in there. I would say I usually aim for like a third of the section filled with Frit. Not really any type of calculation for that. It's just something I've experimented with, using more and using less. Problem is if you don't use enough, it won't fill in everything and you'll have to add more later on. If you add too much, then it gets really difficult to get it all tagged to the inside wall without creating spots where it clogs the entire section. Now I'm just pre-warming the whole thing after I dump the Frit in, just to get it nice and warm before I go in to attach a blow tube to the end of it. Now I'm getting ready to attach the blow tube. This is where it's really important, for me at least, to use a blow hose. I know for a long time I would do something like this without using a blow hose. When I've got one connected to it though, it ends up giving me a much cleaner weld, and it also makes it a lot easier for me to get it on center right away. Because what I do is once I get the blow tube on there, I can puff and pull right away, and then I can go straight to the roller while it's still somewhat soft to move it around a little bit to get the tube to the center point that I need it at. Right now I'm just closing that down a little bit to fit the size of my blow tube. Now I am tilting it downwards a little bit because I don't want the Frit to pour out or to pour into that weld. Now you can see it's a decent weld there. Just going to center it on my roller. And it looks like I didn't even use the blow hose on this one. I highly recommend it though. It's something I normally do. You'll see here when I go to actually tagging the Frit and blowing the section out, I will be connecting a blow hose. And there I go. I'm using a Fire Kiss swivel. Can't recommend those enough. They work really well. Spins smooth. It's nice and light. Had mine for probably 3 or 4 years now. Haven't had any issues with it. So I start with the end closest to the blow tube. Right now I'm just trying to tag the Frit to the inside wall. So I'm basically just getting the clear just hot enough to where the Frit starts to stick to it, spinning at the same time at an even rate, so that way I get an even saturation. And then I just move down. You'll see kind of a band of red hot that'll move with you. that's your line to go off of to know, okay, this is where the heat's at and this is where the frit's sticking. Then I go straight into blowing it out. I started at the end there because that section was already hot from tagging it. Then I'm going back to the mouthpiece end. I'm going to blow it out and then work my way down. And sometimes I'll do this 2 or 3 times. I'll blow it out, I'll condense it back down, blow it back out again. It's really important to make sure that the frit is fully melted into the inside of the hollow section. If it's not, then it could end up, sucking through the mouthpiece when the end user is using your pipe. Otherwise, at the very least, it could cause the piece to crack later on because of the acute angles it creates. One trick that I like to use is as I roll and puff, I spin it on my L marver. It's kind of tough to see from this angle, but what that does is it gives me a nice straight cylinder side. Also helps me match the diameter all the way down because the section that's cold isn't going to move. So if that section is bigger than the section that is hot, well then when I roll it on the L marver and puff, the only part that's going to move is the spot that's narrower, and then it of course will move to the same diameter as the portion that was already cold. Wow, that sounded really confusing, so I hope that makes sense. So as you can see, I'm still puffing it out, condensing it back down, and I'll do this multiple times until I look all the way down the section and I'm happy with it. Now, while I'm doing this, because it's going to be pretty repetitive here over the next few minutes, the reason I like using the frit inside like this, especially a silver striking color, is it creates almost like a fumed pipe effect. When you look at this through the bright light behind it, the pipe will actually be semi-transparent and the colors aren't going to pop nearly as much as when it gets a black background on it. So for me, somebody who struggles with silver and gold fuming, this is kind of a surefire way for me to get a really cool looking color changing pipe. And this is something I've experimented with a number of different silver striking frits, and they all work really well for it. As you guys have seen in the past, it's another thing that I like to do with marbles. I can get a silver gold fumed marble, but for me, it's so much faster and easier just to dip the marble in a silver striking frit and still get that same cool effect without nearly as much effort. And for me, I think it's a lot less expensive that way too. Especially for making production pieces like spoons. I've done coil potted spoons before, and those get really expensive. Of course, you can use China tubing. That's a lot less expensive, but if you have a higher failure rate, sometimes it can cost you more money at the end. And again, I just like the color changing effect that you get from these. That's personally my favorite type of dry pipe, at least, to smoke out of, is one that will change colors as it gets dirty. Mainly because I'm just lazy, so all my pipes are dirty, but also because I just think it looks really cool. Now right now I'm going to actually start shaping out my spoon. I've done these a number of different ways. Sometimes I start in the middle, sometimes I'll start at the bowl, sometimes the mouthpiece. Looks like on this one right now, I'm actually starting at the bowl end. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm kind of building up more glass. So it's hard to tell there, but I'm pushing glass in, I'm adding glass to that section that's going to become the bowl. And I'm also puffing a little bit as I do that. What that's doing is it's giving me more material there to work with. And it's also creating that almost a Maria edge between where the bowl and the neck of the pipe are going to meet. And this is a great way to teach yourself to spin 2 different rods. That's one of the hardest things to learn, I think, is to teach both of your hands to spin at the same speed, especially when the rods are different size, because that's something you have to take into account. If one rod is larger than the one in your other hand, then you have to adjust your spin rates to make up for that. Once you practice it enough, though, it just becomes second nature. Your hands just automatically start to match the speed of each other. Now, what I'm doing here is first I'm getting it very hot. I actually push in a little bit and add more glass to the middle there. And then as it starts to condense, then I'm pulling just a little bit, small puffs to make sure it stays open and even on the inside. And that's how I'm forming my neck. For me, I think that was one of the most important things to learn on spoon necks, is to make sure I added enough glass to the middle, condensed it, and made it thick enough before I started to pull that out. Otherwise, what happens is in a lot of cases, I would get a thin neck there. Now I'm beginning to work on the mouthpiece, adding a lot of glass here. Want it to be nice and thick. That way when it's time to remove the blow tube, it won't need too much more work. It'll be almost fully finished already. Just adding some of the glass down there. As you can see, whatever direction I tilt, that's the direction it's going to flow. So if you see my left hand is lower than my right hand, that means the glass is going to be flowing that direction. That's how I add glass different ways. You know, if I move it up or down on one side or the other, it's going to cause the glass to flow in that direction. Now I'm just bringing it to the tooling roller, trying to make sure it's as straight as I can get it. So it was decent. Spoons, I don't really care if it's perfect, as long as it looks okay. And this one did look pretty decent. I do apologize, I didn't get any video of popping the bowl hole or carb. If you guys have any questions on that, definitely send me a message. I can certainly try to answer those. I think the main tip here though is if you notice, I use an offset puntee to disconnect that mouthpiece. I know a lot of guys would use a claw grabber for this, and don't get me wrong, those work. For me though, I had a lot of issue with claw grabbers. They would scratch my glass, the piece would move around too much. So I started using an offset puntee by adding a solid attachment and then hot sealing the puntee onto it. Gives me a really sturdy handle to work off of, because I like to have a really nice mouthpiece. I want to make sure it's thick, nice and round, doesn't feel weird on your lips. So for me, it's worth spending that extra time. If I was trying to make, 5-10 pipes an hour, I don't know if I would go that route though. This concludes the demo. I just want to thank you guys so much for your patience. I know it's been forever since I've released one, and they're not coming out nearly as fast as I wish. I'm still trying to catch up on all my orders. Seems like just no end in sight. I do have a couple other demos I've recorded as well. I'll try my best to find some time to get those edited and uploaded here in the next week. I just want to take a moment though to thank you all for your support. I haven't been as active in the group lately as I'd like, but I just want you to know I appreciate it. I'm still working on some projects that'll help bring some more value to it, and I just hope you guys have a good Christmas. Thank you.